Hey everybody, welcome back. We're here in the garage again working with Tony's 29 GP, and what we have to do, we've already kind of started a little bit, but all we did was start pulling some safety wire and cotter pins. But he got the PTO shifting lever out and fork, which just goes right down in here. The lever goes through the side of the case. It's just one cotter pin. That's all, that cotter pin and a bolt, right?
Yeah.
That holds it in. So, but we have to basically pull the shift fork assembly out, and then the sliding gear set and shaft will come out through the clutch side of the tractor, I believe. So that's what we have to work on now. All right guys, we've got the shifting shaft and forks out, and now it's just a matter of getting the sliding shaft out. The shifting shaft comes out the same side as the clutch and the same side as the sliding gear shaft. In order to get the shifting shaft out, you have to loosen the carrier on the clutch side and drop it down, and that'll give you enough room to slide that shaft out. There's on this side here, let's see, where did it go? I suppose you got it in the cleaning bucket. There's a set bolt with a jam nut that goes right in that area where that little threaded hole is. And then on the end of the shaft here, through this hole, if you can see down here, there's a hole. There's a threaded collar with a bolt that goes through it. You have to turn that threaded collar out after you remove the bolt in order to put pressure on the shifting shaft to get it to drive out. So that's where we're at on this thing. We're kind of stuck here because I'm not sure. I know there's got to be some circlips on the inside of these bearings to hold the outer races in place, but I'm not exactly sure how this bottom shaft comes out, the sliding gear shaft. So we're going to have to do some research and figure that out. But we'll be back. Well guys, we got it out. It ended up being a lot more complicating, or a lot more time consuming, than we originally planned for. We ended up calling Rudy, and he was nice enough to bring over his he had a different set of pullers, plus he had a bearing splitter. So essentially what we ended up doing was we were able to get the bearing and carrier off of the clutch side, but then if you come over here to this side, you'll notice we have the flywheel off, because we had to pull the flywheel in order to get the bearing separator and the puller on the shaft, because the flywheel was in the way, because we had to pull this bearing off the shaft this way in order to slide the shaft out the transmission that way. So bearing separator, puller, flywheel has to come off to create room for that. We pulled that bearing off, and then we slid the shaft out that way, which gave us an empty top side of the transmission housing. So a lot more work than we originally anticipated. I knew it was going to be involved, but I wasn't expecting to pull the flywheel, and I wasn't expecting to have to call Rudy, and he was, once again, Rudy goes out of his way to help and brings over the bearing splitter and the pullers, and actually here's the pullers right here that he brought over, and the splitter. So there we go. Those are the tools we needed. So this went behind the bearing, and then the puller hooks onto the back of the splitter to pull the bearing off the shaft. So, and I just got grease on my hands after getting all cleaned up, but anyhow, there you have it. Flywheel's on the ground, And all you have to do to pull the flywheel is there's 2 bolts on the back side, just like the Model D. You put some wedges in the flywheel there, and that spreads it just enough where you can work it off the splined end of the crankshaft. Sorry, my nose is all plugged up with dust and everything else. So, but anyways, here's the sliding gear assembly, and there again is the broken keyway, the reason why we had to take it apart. So, new shaft is right here. So we have to take everything off the old shaft, put it on the new shaft. As the shaft gets slid into place, and then the bearing is put on from the other side. And let's see. I would assume that the bearing will either go on hot, meaning we'll have to heat it up in order to push it on, or the nut, the castle nut that's on the back side of that bearing will actually push that bearing on to the shaft. But I'm not real sure about the preload on this, because there should be preload. If I remember correctly, tapered roller bearings usually have a preload to them, and I'm not sure what that needs to be or how to set it. So we're going to have to do some reading in the manual and go from there. But other than that, Tony pretty much just cleaned up a bunch of parts. We do still have to get we got to get this access panel off here so that we can get the seat spring off in order to get the shift lever out to replace the broken return spring or centering spring. So, because this shift lever will not come out with the seat spring in place. So we'll have to get at that, replace that real quick, and then I think we're ready to start putting things back together after that. So, oh, we do need to find a fan shaft. So if anybody needs or knows where we can find a fan shaft for a 29 John Deere GP, let me know. I do have some sources to check, but from what I understand, the fan shafts are kind of a problem on these tractors, and they're hard to find in good shape. So if anybody knows where we can find a 29 GP fan shaft, let me know. So I know this was a quick update. We didn't really show much of the teardown process, but part of the problem is this thing is so greasy that for me to touch the camera and do all this other stuff, it's really difficult, unless I want to go through a million pairs of gloves, which I can do. The other part of it was just so, it fought us every step of the way to get that bearing off, to get this bearing carrier and bearing off, to get that bearing off. Ended up pulling the flywheel, calling Rudy. I mean, it was this whole ordeal of just trying to get 2 bearings off so we could get the shaft out. So I do apologize for not taking as much video of the teardown process, but it's really quite simple. It's just a matter of pulling the bearing and carrier off of this side, getting the bearing off of that side, and then sliding the shaft out. Again, you do have to remove the shift rail and forks before you can slide this out. And in order to remove the shift rail, I found it was actually easier to get this bearing carrier out and down, because this carrier actually overlaps the hole for the shift rail. So you have to get that carrier out and down in order to slide that shift rail out. So other than that, everything's pretty straightforward when you open these things up and really start looking at them. But that's going to do it for me. That's it for the 29 John Deere GP video for this segment anyways. And thanks for watching. Thanks for wrenching with us. And we'll see you in the next one. Hopefully it goes a little smoother and we can show more of the reassembly. So take care, guys. We'll see you in the next one.